So what we're going to take a look at now is how we can update this last active property when a user interacts with our API. Now we do have options for this, and what we're going to take a look at is using something called an action filter. And action filters allow us to do something either before the request is executing or after the request has executed. So let's go and take a look at how we can do this. And inside our helpers folder, let's create a new C# class, and what we'll do is call this one log user activity and press return. And what we're going to do inside here is we're going to implement an iAction filter or an iAsync action filter. So what we'll do is we'll say iAsync action filter, and then what we'll do is we'll go and bring in ASPNET Core MVC filters, and then we'll need to go ahead and implement this particular interface. So what we have is the context of the action that is executing, and if we take a look at what we get inside there, then this gives us access to our HTTP context, the model state, the result, root data, and our controller. So that's pretty good. And what we also have is inside this method as well is we have next. What's going to happen next after the action is executed? And we can use this property or this parameter to execute the action and then do something after this is executed. So what we'll do is we want to get access to the context after this is executed, and if we take a look at what this returns, then this returns the action executed context. So we get access to the context before, and if we take a look at what we return from this, then we get the action executed after. So since we want to not do this before the user's actually doing whatever they're doing, we're going to wait until they've done that, and then we're going to execute and update this last active property. So what we do inside here is we'll get hold of the context that we get from the next. So we'll say var result context equals, and then we're going to await next. And we need to make this async as well. So inside here we now have a context after the action has been executed, and what we want to do here is, first of all, we're going to add this in a central place. So we can put it in one place, kind of switch it on, and then forget about it. But what we want to do is check to see if the user's authenticated, because we don't want to try and execute something when we don't have a user to do this on. So what we'll do is we'll check the result context, and we'll check the HTTP context inside there, and then the user, and then the identity, and inside here we've got access to an isAuthenticated property. Now if the user sent up a token and we've authenticated the user, then this is going to be true, otherwise it's going to be false. So we'll check this property first, and we need to make sure the user's not authenticated, and if that's the case, we're simply going to return and do nothing else with this action filter. But if they are authenticated, then what we want to do is obviously update that last active property. So what we'll do is we'll save our username equals, and we'll go to our result context and the HTTP context and the user, and we'll say get username, and use our extension method to go ahead and get this, because this is still a claims principle and we have our extension method on this. What we need to do then is get access to our repository, and to do that inside here we can use the service locator pattern. And how this works, and we actually used this inside our program.cs class earlier, but what we'll do is we'll say result context, and we'll say HTTP context, and we're going to request services, and we're going to say get service, and then we're going to specify that we want to get access to the iUser repository, and we'll bring this in as well, and we need to bring in the API interfaces to get hold of this, and our get service needs to come in from Microsoft Extensions dependency injection, but this one for some reason doesn't auto import very often. So what we'll do is we'll say using Microsoft Extensions and we'll say dependency injection, and that should remove that particular error. So then we have our repo. What we need to do then is get hold of our user object. And what we'll do is we'll say var user equals await, and we'll say repo, and we'll say get user by username async, and we'll pass in the username. And then what we'll do, we'll set our user last active property equal to date time, and we'll need to bring in system for the date time, and we're going to say date time now. And then we're going to go ahead and save our changes. So we'll say await repo and save all async. And then with this in place, what we need to do is we need to add this as a service, this log user activity, so we can make use of it. So what we'll do, we'll head over to our application service extensions, and we'll just add this as another service. And we'll say services, and we'll say add scoped, because we want this to be scoped to the context of a request. And we'll say log user activity, and add this inside here. And then what we can do, we can go up to where our controllers are all deriving from. So we'll go up to our base API controller. And then what we can do is add this attribute to this controller, and then all of our controllers, and therefore all of the actions inside of those controllers are going to be making use of this action filter. So the way that we do this, we specify that we want to use a service filter, and then we give it a type of, and then we can say log user activity. And let's just go ahead and bring in API helpers. And let's go take a look to see if this has worked. So we'll head back to Postman, and let's see, who am I logged in as? I'm logged in as Lisa. So I'll get a new token. And if we just execute any of these requests, what we should see is the effects of this. And I've now made an action, and if I go to an earlier section and get user by username and just get Lisa and click send, then what we should see is that this last active property has been updated. Now this is today's date in my case, so I can see that's worked. But if we go back to VS Code and just take a look at what we're doing here, then what we're doing here is we're using the get user by username async method inside here. And if we go and take a look at that in our user repository, then this particular method, what we're doing here, we're actually including the photos with this request as well. And then we're getting the user by username. And we're doing it that way because at the moment, all we have access to in a token is the user's username. Now, a better method to use to do this would actually be the one above, the one that says get user by ID async, because in this one, we're using the find async method, and this one finds an entity with the given primary key values. And because our IDs are automatically indexed, then this one is going to be more efficient than the one below. And also, we don't include the photos in this one, and we don't need to include them because we're not using our photos in setting the last active property. So what we'll do next is we'll take a look at what we can do to correct that and make use of this method instead of this one.